Welcome to another episode of According to Amabile. I'm your host, Michele Amabile, and today I am very happy to welcome to the show the director, producer of a new documentary coming out about a woman near and dear to my heart and many people's hearts, Jill Sobule, who we tragically lost in 2025. It's a documentary that they started recording before her death. They were working on it, and we're going to get into it. It's called She's Gonna Sing, You're Gonna Listen. Love the name of this documentary. There's a Kickstarter campaign. We'll get into all of that later. Tom Ropelewski, welcome to According
Thanks, Michele. Good to be with you.
And
now, do you know the reference that title is to?
Why did you tell our audience?
It's actually a deep cut for all of the fans know what it is, which is on her first Atlantic record, the Jill Sobule record that had Kissed a Girl and Supermodel. The original, before what was supposed to be the first track, which was called Margaret, she laid in a sample from Jackie Gleason as Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners, and it's just his voice saying, "She's gonna sing, you're gonna listen." And I'm sure he was yelling at his raccoon brothers because his wife was going to do a talent show or something. And she thought that was funny, and she put it on the front of what was supposed to be the first song. The label then made Margaret the second song. So it's kind of weird to have the only sample on the record be before the second song on the record. But that's where that comes from. And one of the fans actually suggested that be the title. And so far it's stuck. There may be something that comes up better, but so that's the working title for now.
Now, many people know Jill's hits, like you said, I Kissed a Girl, which was a big song when I was working in alternative radio. Then Supermodel, which took on a life of its own because of Clueless. The movie, I mean, that became a big, but there was just so much more to Jill. And I know that you were trying for a while to get her to do a documentary. It took some convincing. Tell us the origins.
Not me. Apparently other people had tried and she turned them down. I never got any resistance at all. What happened, we sort of backed into it because back in 2017, I had met Jill in 2014 at the premiere of a movie called Gone Girl, which my wife had a producer credit on, and Jill's girlfriend at the time, Kim Dickens, had a major role in.
With Ben Affleck.
Yes, exactly. And we met it. There was a premiere in New York City, and there was a dinner beforehand, and people were sat by, but I was put at a table next to Jill, and I didn't know who she was. She said she was a singer, but I didn't really, and I love music, but I didn't really recall. I was probably listening to Pearl Jam and all this stuff at that time. And but I of course knew that song, but we didn't talk about music. We talked about movies. And she's a huge movie fan. And we ended up talking about silent films, and we both had both of our favorite silent film was a movie called Sunrise. Now, who gets into that stuff? It was kind of like meeting my wife. You know, I had met someone who just like we talked about these arcane things that we had in common that we loved. It was that kind of immediate relationship. Like there's a lot we have in common. We're both sports fans. And my wife said it, and it was across the table talking to someone else. Look, she kept looking at me like, why is he talking to this attractive woman so animatedly? And afterwards, she said, who was that woman? I said her name was Jill. Well, I hope you got her phone number because I want to meet her too. And so when we got home that night, I looked her up on Spotify and heard all this amazing music that she had done. And we just stayed in touch and became really good friends. Now, in 2017, we were both in New York, and Trump had just been inaugurated, and the day after was the Million Woman March. And we went there, and I was really not touched, but I was kind of shocked that nobody was singing. They were marching, they were walking, they had signs. Madonna was there. Madonna didn't sing. I'm like, there's got to be people have to be writing amazing protest songs during this first Trump era. And so we started this movie. I said, Jill, I want to make a documentary about the current state of the protest song, because Jill was always writing great protest songs, often with a lot of humor, but often sometimes biting, sometimes thoughtful. And so she was one of those troubadours that was still writing good protest music. And I said, let's see who's doing songs and let's make a documentary about that. And so she would be kind of my entree into the world of singer-songwriter protest, the current state of the protest song. So we started that movie, and what I found very early on is hundreds of good songwriters were writing really good protest music and posting them on YouTube for 200 hits. And I
200 hits.
yeah, or if you were Joan Baez, maybe 25, maybe to 20,000 hits, but it was not, or much less actually using than that. Or it was great. It was the people from the 60s, Graham Nash. And I'm like, I don't want to make a movie about how great the 60s were for protest music.
Right.
And it was very interesting to I come out of a narrative. I was a comedy writer. I've directed movies. I come out of a screenwriting tradition of narrative storytelling. And even the documentaries I've made I've tried to have a narrative arc and kind of an emotional storyline. And I couldn't find the storyline in this movie. It could be a compendium of a whole bunch of good protest songs. That wasn't a movie that I could get my arms around. I didn't know what that was. And then when COVID hit, we finally kind of put it aside. But after COVID, about 2 years ago, I said to Jill, I just want to make a movie about you. You're plenty interesting enough. And we'd already started filming in 2017, and I had some good interview stuff. I had some good performance stuff. We just kept going with the documentary about Jill. And, right before she passed away on May 1st of this year, literally a couple days before, and we were talking almost every day. So I never got any resistance to her making a documentary with me. I think there was a level of trust and a level of friendship. She knew I was gonna treat her, fairly and with love, which is indeed what I'm hoping to do. But right before she passed away, I called her up and said, Jill, I want to stop filming and start editing because I've got all this stuff. I think I've got a movie or very close to one. Let me cut it and then we'll see what we need to do. And she said, fine. And then a couple days later, she literally passed away. I got the word from her manager, a guy named John Porter, who called me and said, Tom, I hate to tell you, we lost Jill. Now, I thought he lost her as a client, like she moved on to
Oh,
someone else. Because who knows? I wasn't really deep into that part of her world. And then he said, no, she passed away in a fire. And we were just, we were all in shock, So, um, anyway, after putting it aside for a little while, I picked up, I got back behind my editing board and started cutting again. I found it was very comforting to kind of be with her every day, as I have been since she passed away in the editing room, just putting together this film.
and you filmed in so many different locations, in tour stops, New York, Nashville. So you had a lot to work with.
A lot of stuff. I've probably got 30 live songs, performances of live songs, but sometimes multiple performances of the same song in different venues, in different arenas. So I had a lot to work with. And I'm very close to having a rough cut. I still have a few more interviews to do. I'm going to LA tomorrow to get a couple more interviews. And I'm feeling like I'm closing in on this movie. I mean, of course, a lot of the expense now is going to be in post-production, with the expense of, getting rights to early videos, getting rights to the songs, all that stuff. There's, rabbit hole of that kind of stuff to secure. But in terms of telling her story, I guess in some ways I'm very lucky that we shot an awful lot before she passed away.
And it was so sad the way she passed away, too. I mean, who would have ever thought it would be because of a fire?
I know who dies in a house fire these days. And she was staying with old friends. Now, one of the interesting things about Jill, and we talk about it in the movie, is for the past handful of years, she didn't. I resist saying that she was homeless
She
because
couch surfed a lot. I've heard this from
she
people.
counts. But she didn't have a permanent residence. She had a bunch of stuff in storage in Los Angeles. She had stuff in my apartment in New York. She had stuff in our place in Berkeley. And she kind of she was saying, well, maybe I'll live in Denver, maybe LA, maybe New York. She couldn't, but I said, come on, wherever she was, people were saying, well, stay with us,
Aw.
find a place around our area. Because in the Bay, where I live in Berkeley, and one of her best musical partners is a producer named Julie Wolfe, who lives here. So I mean, we were lobbying for the Bay Area. Um, so my wife just walked in. I'm doing my podcast. Oh, okay. Um, so anyway, she just never got around to it. Never got around to having a permanent residence.
And everybody wanted to adopt her,
They
basically.
did, yeah. She was, as Kay Hanley says, it was always high-end couch surfing. It wasn't the old traditional thought, staying on some, college ratty old couch. It was usually pretty high-end.
And I'm glad you brought up Kay Hanley because you've got a lot of people in this documentary talking about their love of Jill, Richard Barone, Kay Hanley. There's
John Doe,
oh wow.
John Doe from X, Tom Morello, uh, uh, Matt Groening. I mean, it's an eclectic, cool bunch of people that I've interviewed for this film.
Now, when you were looking at your footage, when did you realize that you had something bigger than what you had set out to do?
I don't know if it's bigger.
Feels
The
bigger,
she certainly encompassed a lot. And so I always knew that. I always, and I always organized my material by kind of thematic modules. So I know I'd have a module about protest songs. I knew I'd
right?
have a module about uh, TED Talks. I knew I'd have a module about being kind of rootless. Uh, and so there was always all these areas. Now you don't know, as Godard said, a movie needs a beginning, middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. And once I had these thematic modules, then we kind of juggled the order. It does feel like a big film, and if the other interesting thing, so many of her songs are autobiographical on some level or another, that the movie is really a musical. It's structured like a Hollywood musical in the sense that the songs move the story forward, which I can't think of another musical that does, or musical biography, musical documentary that had the kind of the opportunity to do that.
Did you have access to early days like childhood photos and
Yeah, her brother, I became, her brother's in the movie, her nephews are in the movie.
oh,
Um, the they have um, excuse me. Hey, Leslie, can you guys talk elsewhere? Um, the yeah, they dug up some old home movies. And Jill, when she was born, she was pigeon-toed. So from like 3, 4, 5 years old, she was in full leg casts because that's how they were trying to get her legs straight. And then when she was in grammar school age, she had to wear orthopedic shoes, big shoes. There's a song in the movie called Big Shoes uh, about hating to wear big shoes, that the other little girls had these wonderful shoes, and were called Tinkerbell and she was called Frankenstein. And but she got over that. And we have footage of this stuff. So it's really great. She had an older brother. Her older brother Jim is 6 years older, and he was the one with the junior high school rock band, and he was the one that really formed her early musical tastes, because while her girls were listening to, her peers were listening to, you know, teeny bopper stuff, he was listening to Canned Heat and uh, Jimi Hendrix and
Led
MC5.
Zeppelin.
Oh, Led Zeppelin. Well, it's
Yeah.
even pre-Led Zeppelin, because this is, her tastes are really formed in the mid 60s.
Oh,
But
okay.
Led Zeppelin, then later Bowie and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it was great.
Must have been heartwarming to talk to her family and hear those stories. And was there any footage from the Lilith Fair or any of the '90s shows? I mean, because
No, and then
because
you know
I was
what?
thinking about this because you know how we have. I mean, we have these, right? We can
Yeah.
film everything everywhere, but in the '90s we didn't really have that.
No, and that's the area that I have. It's funny because she talks about her life throughout this whole movie. there's not uh, there's not a lot of need for like photos or I mean footage. Good footage I can use, but that's an area that I don't really have any. Between I mean I've got the videos she made at that period, but there's not a lot of footage of film footage. There's photos, but film footage of her between like 95 and the early aughts.
Yeah, because I can just imagine if we had these during that era, can you
Yeah.
imagine the videos that we would have gotten from that tour with all those artists on the
Oh
logo?
yeah, yeah. Well, there's a section in the movie about that period because she was a little resentful. She wasn't quite embraced. I don't know that she wasn't embraced by those girls, but while they were on the big stage, she was on the little stage.
Right.
It was like a little stage where up and coming people were put. I mean, it was a
But
good
she
bunch
had a
of
hit
people.
song. She had
Yeah,
a
and
hit
she,
song.
for some reason, she ended up on the little stage. Um, and she has a song on her the Happy Town album called Bitter, which was kind of and it's basically I don't want to be bitter.
I think I
Um,
remember that. Yeah,
yeah,
I think we, I believe, yeah.
it's a great song, but she felt more akin to the rockers, the guy rockers, because she considered herself a shredder. She, really loved to play guitar, and she's a terrific guitar player. And she really felt more akin to the outlaw badass guys like John Doe and Steve Earle and Tom Morello, and those are the people that she hung out with from, pretty early on, pretty early on. Those were her who she considered more of her peers.
Well, that explains why Tom's in the documentary because
Yeah,
his Rage was coming up the same time she was. It was like
yeah,
that
yeah,
whole
yeah.
like brotherhood and sisterhood of musicians from that
Of course,
and the
of course.
90s were such an interesting period of music because on the one hand you had the aggressive music, you had your grunge, then you had your Lilith Fair artists, and then there was the whole mighty mighty boss tones like the
Right,
squirrel nut zippers era, no doubt. It was
right.
such an interesting time musically, and the fact that she did have hit songs in the middle of all that, cutting through all that noise is outstanding.
It was an interesting time because when she was on Atlantic, um, she was told because she and Jewel were signed at around the same time, and their albums, first albums for Atlantic came out around the same times. Well, Jewel sold 5 million copies, and Jill sold 75,000 copies. And she was told by the management, there's room on the radio for one of you, and it's going to be Jewel. And yet they didn't drop her at that point. She was still making music, but you kind of be told that you're the second banana, and that's what she had to deal with. And basically, radio at that time, there were when you think about it, they didn't. I mean, you might have if you alt radio was a whole different thing.
We were all so
Yeah, right.
we were
So,
friends.
but on AM rate, whatever with FM radio, there was maybe one room for one female artist in an hour among the guys, and that's just the way that radio worked, and that's how the record companies had to kind of play the game, uh, which was not the greatest thing for someone like Jill, who was making pop music.
Pop music that people liked. You know,
Yes, exactly. Right, right,
you could see it at the shows. She did have a following of very, very, uh, I want to say, loyal fans.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
very, very, very loyal. And as a
it's
matter of
so.
fact, over the past 10 years or so, she never had a set list. She might have an idea for the first song and maybe the last song, but she'd just wing it. She would just kind of go with what she was feeling from the crowd. And she'd often take requests and often she just, but she never had anything set. She liked opening for people because then she could get home in time to watch her the Denver Nuggets on television
Yeah, she was a
live.
sports fan.
She was a total sports fan. One of the things Tom Morello said, he said the last text I got from her, she said, "All I want to do is play shows, watch the Broncos, and resist." That was her final protest message to him.
Well, the thing about Jill, which I think was groundbreaking about her, she was doing her one woman show, and
Hmm.
F seventh grade. I love that title, by the way,
It's
because many of
great.
us hated seventh grade. I hated it. So I was down with that. But the fact that she was doing that, and you probably captured some great moments from that show. Were you
Yeah, we
filming?
shot the rehearsals, we shot parts of the show. We had her do a couple songs just for my camera, so that we could really shoot them well. Um, it was great, and the show was great. It was chosen by the New York Times as a critics pick. It was up for a Drama Desk Award, and it was a one-woman show with a band, and the band played different characters in her life. And I didn't. The movie doesn't really mirror the structure of the play, but
Right.
it certainly there's elements of the play in the movie.
It gives an idea of what might have been, and who knows what that would have turned into if she was
Yeah.
still
Well, the
doing.
reason she was in Minneapolis is she was gonna mount a production of seventh grade there. That's why she was there at that time
Yeah,
when
we
she.
were talking about her loyal fan base, and I want to talk about something very very important, which is the Kickstarter campaign, which you have going for the documentary, and it's running through Jill's birthday, January 16th, which is poignant. But talk about the crowdfunding, the crowdfunding campaign, and how
Well,
that's going.
Jill basically she didn't invent crowdfunding, but she
No,
was really one of
she
the
didn't
early.
invent Kickstarter.
No, but she launched her campaign for it was called jillsnextrecord.com. Uh, and it launched literally 2 months before Kickstarter eventually premiered. And after she went directly to her fans. She didn't want to just ask for money, so she was offering goods and services in return, like Zoom shows, and you can come sing on my record, and you get a special thanks. Or she would put your name into what was called the donor song, which was the final song on the
The
California.
donor song, love it.
Yeah, and it's just a list of all these people she's thankful, she's grateful to. Um, but that all came about because in the late 90s, when message boards started, like fan-based message boards were just starting, there was one for Jill, and Jill was on it. She would talk with her fans. And one day she disappeared. They didn't know what happened to her. And one of the fans found out that she had stepped on her computer, on her laptop, and she didn't
Oh
have.
no.
And so the other fans decided to raise a collection and buy her a new computer, which they did. And so years later, she kind of went to that model of like going directly to the fans and not asking for money, but like I said, offering them goods and services. And that was for 2009 album, The California Years. And she stayed with that model, for most of the rest of her recording career.
Well,
So the
hopefully,
Kickstarter, this is my first Kickstarter, and I had a couple of advisors that were going to help Jill raise money for the F seventh grade original cast album, and she passed away before she gave them the okay to go ahead with that. But they knew that this documentary was being made because I was giving them clips from the show that they could use in their Kickstarter. And they said, well, since Jill isn't going to, we're not going to do the record at this point, do you need some help with the documentary? And I said, sure, I would love that. So that's how we got together. And so this is my first Kickstarter campaign. And in the spirit of Jill, it's offering goods and services that for the fans so they can feel part of this process. One of the things I'm doing is the Jill Sobule estate, which her brother is running, has over the past 6 months, 8 months, um, is accumulating all the unreleased material that Jill left behind, and there's a lot of it. She wrote a lot of songs with partners, Richard Drone being one, a bunch of other people. And at this point, they have 200 plus discrete songs, about 900 recordings. Some of them are multiple recordings, different
wow.
versions of these songs. But there's over 200, somewhere between 200 and 300 songs that they're putting together for ultimately some sort of unreleased or rarities collection. But in the meantime, they're letting me put together a sampler of some of them and offering them on the Kickstarter page. So as I reach different tiers in,
Levels.
I'm dropping songs to the supporters, and there's some great. I mean, there's stuff that's I won't say as good as the things she's released, but probably as good as the things she released over the years. Just very, very solid. Some are demos with her and a guitar. Some are full band recordings, and there's just great stuff. I mean, when this stuff ultimately comes out, it's going to be really solid. I think the fans are really going to love it.
I feel like there's a lot of incentives too when you have a Kickstarter campaign, like people can get a credit for the
Yeah, a thank
movie.
you credit, and also like what Jill did on her last album, she had a personal Lord and Savior credit for a high level, and someone bought one from her, and I think J.J. Abrams did one for her at one point, and someone bought one for the documentary. So someone is going to be credited as the personal Lord and Savior of the movie. So
Personal Lord and Savior. That's so Jill.
totally Jill,
That's
totally
so,
Jill.
that's amazing. And what is the goal of the Kickstarter campaign?
Well, to help to defray the costs of this movie. It's not going to pay for the movie, but it's gonna just help. And so I mean, this movie is coming out of the budget so far is coming out of my pocket. And my goal with all my documentaries is I just don't want to lose too much money. They're personal projects to me, they're passion projects for me. And I've made three other ones, and they've all kind of done okay. They didn't lose any money, and some have actually made a little bit of money. And my goal with this one is, I mean, I started this movie just to sort of help Jill kickstart the next phase of her career and to turn people on that didn't may not know her music. Um, and now it's really to kind of boost her legacy. Um, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I think this film has a chance of like being bought by Netflix or maybe distributed by IFC Films or there's a lot of interest in Jill right now. And I think the film really is going to deliver for the fan of Jill. I think you're going to get a lot of information you didn't go and beautiful performances of her songs. If you don't know who she is, it's going to be, an incredible discovery of this singer-songwriter that you should know about, that we all should know about, that we may not have.
Well, you mentioned Netflix, and that's probably a great uh, space for it. People are watching documentaries now, and it's a very popular thing for people to watch. I mean,
Yeah.
like anytime I talk to people, they're asking me, "Did you watch this documentary, that documentary?" And you're right. There's a lot of interest in Jill, especially since
And
her.
I think what happened is documentaries, probably since the 80s, early 90s, have taken the kind of the storytelling tools of narrative film so that they're more entertaining. There was an era pre-1980 where documentaries were sort of informational or educational. They
Oh,
didn't
boring.
necessarily tell a story and boring. Yeah, and then filmmakers started to say, well, why shouldn't they be as entertaining as a narrative film and maybe even better because it's true. And so I've learned from my techniques as a narrative filmmaker to apply those to documentary. I think all documentaries is why people are compelled to watch them because they're entertaining. They have a story and they have an emotional kick, hopefully, which certainly this one does.
And your documentary films are usually award nominated, and
Yeah, some have. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, you're a pro at this, obviously, and you could take what you've learned from that and you could apply it to this. And you're right. I think documentaries have become very entertaining, like Becoming Led Zeppelin or some of
Yes,
the
yeah, yeah.
documentaries that we've
Well, the
seen.
question I have now is what's the ideal length for a documentary? Because I don't know. I think
Great
it can't,
question.
I think it can't be boring. I think that's the only thing. It can't be boring. But I watched 5 hours of Billy Joel, and I don't even like Billy Joel.
That was an amazing documentary.
Yeah, yeah, it was great. And I loved Becoming Led Zeppelin. And I mean, there's so many good documentaries out there now. And the other question is, do you make it for the fans or do you make it for the people that don't know Jill? And I think you definitely have to service the fans, but it should be anyone who doesn't know her who turns it on should be intrigued by it and engaged by it. So, but right now I've got a cut that's crackling 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to cut out of this. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it doesn't have to be under 2 hours, although maybe ultimately it will be. I don't know. I'm
And
not exactly sure.
you said you want to add things like where do you add when you have Margaret Cho in the documentary
Oh,
and
and you know what? Margaret Cho, as funny as she is, she's like a Jill scholar. She she talks about one of Jill's songs called San Francisco, which she directed the video for. She really understands how that song works. She understands the levels of it, the themes of it. Um, so I mean, she's like a Jill scholar in the
Jill
film.
Scholar, I like that.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And then they were both in the video for San Francisco. They also did one called the Bear Song, which is, because Margaret is from San Francisco, and they came up to San Francisco, and it's about the gay bear culture and how if they were guys, they'd want to be bears. It's a very, very funny song, and it's a very funny video, and Margaret talks about that one too. So Margaret is very just. I think she'll be surprised. You'll be surprised that she's. I mean, she's entertaining. She's not making jokes. She's just really understanding how Jill worked.
But these two women probably bonded on humor in the first place because
They probably did. I'm sure they did.
Jill was funny. Yeah.
Jill was very fun. And as a matter of fact, that's the key to Jill's political songs is no matter what, some of them could be biting, some of them could be thought-provoking. They were always funny.
Well, how have the fans responded to the campaign since you launched it? But
It's been great. I mean, our initial goal was for $40,000 and we made it in 5 days.
five
Uh,
days.
5 days.
Wow.
And then I offered these unreleased songs, and I think we're going to reach 50,000 within an additional 5 days. So we'll take it as far as we can go. The budget of this film it's budgeted to be about $200,000, $220,000 when all is said and done. And everything will be used directly toward the movie. Um, and the fans are just there for it. I'm really appreciative.
Well, I'm going to drop the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the bio for this interview. And Tom, just thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with
Well,
us.
thanks for having me so much.
I'm just very appreciative, and I think this is wonderful. And I think when people get to know Jill, they're going to fall in love with her.
They absolutely will. I mean, I did, and everyone I know did. So check out the Kickstarter campaign, listen to Jill's music, and I think it's gonna be quite a discovery.
Tom, thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
According
Michele.
to Amabile. Thank you for watching. And if you like what you saw here, remember to like and subscribe. And remember, the documentary is coming out. Like I said, we're going to put that link in the bio, and it is called She's Gonna Sing, You're Gonna Listen.
Jill
Jill
Sobule, she's
Sobule.
gonna sing.
She's gonna sing, You're Gonna Listen. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Take care.